Despite years of critical acclaim, the Jak Daxter series that was created by Naughty Dog, in my personal opinion, still does not get the attention it deserves looking back. The technical prowess showcased by harnessing the full potential of a console, well documented to be difficult to work with, wasn't truly matched until the end of the system's lifespan and even into the next generation of hardware. And yet, Precursor Legacy set the bar in 2001. Oh my god. Even shifting the series into the open world trend still allowed for some phenomenal and memorable locations to come to life for the player to explore. So, in celebration of this series, today we'll be ranking every single Jak Daxter level. A solid 82 levels from worst to best. But it's important before we begin to establish some ground rules, as this series spanned multiple different genres across its lifespan. Our primary objective is to discuss the beloved and not so beloved locations of the series at large. Thankfully, it's not a large series like some of the others we've previously ranked, with only 6 titles. However, our focus is on the core platforming run and gun action these games are known for. So for that reason, the pure racing title Jak X will not be included in these rankings. Now, for a lot of these locations, linear or open, there are clear, distinct boundaries, but when it comes to Haven City being a sprawling open world map, thankfully, this can also be broken down into some very clear and distinct areas, so that we can review each of these as their own spot on the list. Some of these places do appear across multiple games, so as usual, we are only looking at unique levels, meaning that unless there are any drastic changes to the layout or design, these will be counted as a single location. The smaller landmarks within these levels will be treated as a part of the broader map, and any transitional areas which are not part of any one level will just be ignored for the sake of simplicity. The goal here is to be as unbiased and fair as humanly possible, which is why I've worked hard to focus on the core structure, mechanics, and design of each location, as well as looking at the different objectives that fill these levels. But when it comes to open world games with such a deep narrative presence, I will also be taking into account how these levels fit within the grand scheme of their game. So, with all of that criteria out of the way, the only question remaining is, what is the absolute worst Jak Daxter level? That prize goes to number 82. Europa from the Lost Frontier. The great thing about this series is that there really isn't much of anything truly terrible to get through for the most part. There was certainly mediocre, but never anything genuinely trash. Aside from Europa, the bastardization of this series is showcased expertly here with a claustrophobic, suffocating hub location that completely fails at any form of design. And no, you can't blame this on being a PSP game, because trust me, we will see some amazing PSP levels down the line. I can appreciate the aesthetic they were going for, and the music here is actually gorgeous. But everything else is a mess. For such a small map, it sure is crowded with these Easter egg hunt side missions, but they're just so awkward without any unique landmarks, and when you enter the danger course, oh my god, this is just pathetic. There is no flow, no thought put into any of this course, and no coordination when you reach the only parts that are actually dangerous. And it's awesome to learn the mechanics in this tutorial that never show up again throughout the entire game. And that's absolutely all this place has going for it. We're introduced to this like it's going to be our central base camp for the entire game, but before you know it, you're participating in the slowest chase scene ever, and it's over with in a matter of minutes. There is not much else I can do to translate to you just how bottom of the barrel mediocre and depressing this place is. You think you can understand based on what you've seen, but no. It is the definition of lackluster. Just missing out on the lowest spot, we have the Volcanic Crater from Precursor Legacy. A shockingly early start for this game. I'm sure you're all wondering how I could do such a thing. But if you can hear this image, then you know why it's so low. There is nothing to say about this place, because it has nothing. The previous villages had an abundance of challenges and things to see, but all we get here is the Red Sage's hut, surrounded by rocky cliffs, and these painfully slow minecarts that you really have no choice but to sit and wait for. All of our collectibles are simply purchased instead of earned. And listen, the miners are funny, but they can't save this level, okay? They can't even dig a gem out of a cave, the useless bums. Such a shame to see this amazing title so early on in the list. In at number 80, we've got our first Haven City district with Maintown, and I'd just like to mention again that there isn't much bad in this series, but there is a lot of mediocre, and that is certainly the case when it comes to this commercial high-end part of the city. I mean, it's fine, the design and layout gets the job done, and I was always intrigued by this large temple looking thing, but none of it gets used. That's the big issue with Jak 2, is that the missions are heavily weighted to only half of the map. The only times we actually visit this place with an objective is during the race against Errol through the map, and the second time we have to save lurkers from the Crimson Guard transports. That and the Ratchet and Clank sign is all this location brings to the table. Up next is another stinker from Lost Frontier, the big finale at the end of this game. Now we're just gonna count this entire 3-part thing as one spot because it's just so bad. Phase 1 is a boss battle against Skyheat, who is jacked up on Dark Eco, and let me tell you, this is so boring. There's no strategy, just avoid his attacks, direct him to touch some stuff and hurt himself, or just very slowly use your guns, because that does actually work despite what Daxter tells you. Daxter doesn't shut up, but I guess that was an attempt to mask the lack of any music or sound design here. Phase 2 is another one of this game's trademark slow chase scenes. The mission text says to kill Skyheat, but that couldn't be any less true when the real objective here is just to survive. Have fun figuring that out. And when you finally get through all of that nothing, Phase 3 is a final showdown where you're just flying around shooting at shit and getting shit shot at you. It sucks. Prior to all of this is a detour through Sector 0. This game takes place on the brink of this world that lays unfinished because the precursor rats got bored, I guess. Well, Sector 0 is just some whirlpool in space that just so happens to be nearby. It does not fit in at all. The only thing that happens here is you very slowly descend into the vortex, avoiding the various junk in your way, and after reaching the bottom, we're greeted by Skyheat's ship for another showdown. Even though this takes place before the finale, this is still just another showdown the same as all the others we've seen previously in this game. It's riveting stuff, especially when you have to explain it. I can read your boredom through the screen, so let's move on, because we're only halfway through the bottom 10. Oof. Welcome to New Haven, a new and modern district built on top of the dirtiest hole in the city, during an epic war, after a huge palace collapsed beside it. For God's sake, this area of the map does not fit in with the tone or timeline of this game whatsoever. It's home to Freedom HQ, which needs defending, but otherwise, nothing of note takes place here over the course of this game, so again, there is very little to comment on. Going back to Jak 2, we can see the very similar gardens location. This is an incredibly small part of the map that again is only seen for the Errol race and rescuing lurker missions. But because it does drastically contrast the otherwise harsh industrial theme of Haven City, it does stand out as a district that could have introduced a lot more variety to the game if it had been fleshed out further. Main Town, the gardens, and the bazaars make up half of this world, and all three are simply never used. Split in two, the western market areas are open and mostly transitional, while the eastern market bridges Main Town and the industrial area with a raised highway. Fuck this highway. It's just irritating every single time. We live in a world of hover cars and yet we still get locked in traffic? Between missions, I swear, there is never a soul on this thing, but if you're in a high-speed chase and desperately need to get through here, you're shit out of luck. Thankfully, we do have a few key moments take place in the streets down below. We find the mysterious tent which is home to Onan and Pekka, as well as helping Ashlyn to kill metalheads after a surprise attack. Once we reach Jak 3 during the war, both the gardens and bazaars have been overrun by metalheads. Now look at this place. It's pretty cool and always fun taking the hoverboard and platforming above the river destroying Dark Eco, especially standing on the vents and getting catapulted all over the place. But like most of these at the bottom of the rankings, that's really all that happens in this location. The layout was built around this one mission and couldn't really work for anything else unfortunately, turning what should have been an awesome battleground into a mere transitional location. Now this next mission technically takes place within a grander location that we'll be seeing later on in the video. But even by Lost Frontier standards, this is bottom of the barrel garbage, so it stands on its own. After exploring an abandoned weapon barracks, we find ourselves defending our friends from 3 giant missile towers. Good fucking luck. These things are covered with guns that will blow you out of the sky, but you've got no choice but to fly up alongside to destroy the targets. It's so aimless. I've never seen an epic battle lack any involvement whatsoever. Then finally a missile is launched and Daxter, somehow, warps onto the missile and has to disarm it in one of the most clumsy QuickTime events I've ever seen. This is so poorly done, and as it seems to be with this game, the lack of sound design is just indescribable. Finally, Daxter takes control as we slowly steer the rocket back to destroy the tower. Have fun doing this exact same process again and again for the 2 remaining cannons. Praise the Lord for checkpoints after each missile you successfully destroy, because all you do here is get obliterated. And on that lukewarm note, we're through the 10 worst Jak and Daxter stages. The good news is that we're also through the absolute worst this series has to offer, or what little of it there was to see. But we've still got a way to go before we reach the truly good stuff, so let's keep pushing forward with level number 72. The Phantom Blade. After some fighting back and forth and assuming it doesn't get blown out of the sky by a missile, our hub location for the Lost Frontier takes place on this flying pirate ship, because it's been long enough since Treasure Planet, so we can steal that, right? Sure, why not? This location sucks, but it is home to what could have been a really cool moment that was just poorly executed. Who would have predicted that? After climbing out of Sector Zero and defeating Skyheed's battleship, somehow it's still there, and now we have to hit the poop deck to defend the blade. That sounds really awesome, but the painful reality of just get in the turret and shoot really lets the wind out of your sails. All we get are waves of enemies to mow down and eventually some small aircraft to annihilate before the bad guys eventually retreat. There's not much more that can be said for this location, but when it comes to this title, we've got a lot more to get through yet. Prior to the Skyheat BS we've already covered, we travel back to the city of Europa, only this time we're greeted with a war zone. Buildings are destroyed as we have to scale the rooftops to make our way through. It's weird to think that there is just a giant exposed dark eco vat just casually in the middle of this place, but whatever. It's not long before we find ourselves face to face with a dark eco-mutant. Nothing new or out of the ordinary, aside from the fact that this asshole is a tank and refuses to take damage. Seriously, just look how aggressive this thing is, and we're given no room to fight it either. How is anyone supposed to focus on this? There is no clear strategy that I can find, and when it breaks free, it somehow gets even more overpowered. Getting stuck on this part is just expected of any fool sad enough to play this game through. Like me. I mean, at least there is something to do here beyond god-awful Easter egg hunts, but it's really not much better. Earlier on in the game, we need to travel to the volcano on Brink Island in search for a missing piece to the Eco Finder. Still in competition at the time, Captain Phoenix challenges Jak to a race and then just disappears. Good start. This actually resembles a more classic Jak and Daxter level format next to all of the aerial dogfighting as we make our way to the top of the volcano, taking out enemies, platforming and using some eco powers. There is actually some tension here brought in with the music and seeing the earth crumble around you, but it's still just as uneventful and mediocre when you look back on it and realise that it was only included to pad out this lame entry in the series. Usually by now, the levels we'd be seeing at number 69 would be pretty nice looking back on previous Every Level Ranked episodes, but here we are, still battling through the lackluster as we return to Jak 3's Metal-pede Zone. Right before the game's finale, we make our way through the city protecting Torn, who drives a bomb through the front door of the Metal-pede Tower. This should be a really cool moment and level to follow, but it's just so generic, slowly walking our way through shooting things with the most overpowered weapons in the game. It's not fun, especially when the map features arseholes coming out of arseholes, which is a pretty good summary if I'm being honest. Ew, why is it breathing? There is no use for any of Jak's special abilities here, and within 5 minutes, you're at the top facing Cyber Errol, and then everyone escapes in the nick of time before the head explodes. Really? That's it? It was over before it begun. There was a real lack of inspiration that went into this place, and it shows. Ugh, let's seek some serenity from all of that junk in the Rock Village from Precursor Legacy. Yes, claw-hurling boulders down at you beats messing around with Dark Makers and Metalheads any day of the week. This is a stronger hub area next to the Volcanic Crater we saw at 81, despite still being a simple location. It's where we meet some fun characters like the Gambler, the Warrior and the Geologist, but I love the visuals here, looking out over the water to see the underwater elevator, hopping across the little rafts, but when you actually get the chance to have a good look at the design of this place, I really wish we could have seen more of it. The area we get to explore is actually the basement to what looks to be a town sitting up above on a higher cliff. That is so cool, and I wish we could have had access to this area for a unique level. Again, there isn't much to do around here, but it's still very memorable looking back, especially with that breezy tune filling your ears. And speaking of breezy, it's time to introduce Daxter, the PSP exclusive of the franchise all about bug extermination. Riveting concept, but this is actually a pretty fun game. Orange Lightning starts in the rankings with a decent, albeit pretty tame vehicle stage. Here in Breezy Valley, we've got to spray the infected plants and fly around chasing after these metal bugs. It looks so nice and vibrant with cliffs and waterfalls, but in saying that, it does feel quite closed in and small with very little interest. Later on in the game, we've got a very similar style level in Emerald Isle, which is a lake with rocky tunnels and caves. The missions here are actually worse in my opinion, with an awkward vehicle bombing and an on-rails turret segment, my favourite, but the actual location itself is just slightly better. You wouldn't even know it just playing through the story, but if you actually get in to explore this place, you can find this amazing hidden cliff area which is surprisingly the most detailed part of the map. And by following the path leads you to a geyser that launches you back into the main area. If we'd seen more of this intricate design here, then this may have appeared much higher on the list. When I first saw the light in the sky above the events of Jak 3 as a kid, I never would have expected to eventually be playing 2 dumb levels on board that thing. The first time we see inside the ship, we're in control of some Darkmaker robot which bears a scary resemblance to the mech suits seen in the previous game. What that means is a sequence of tired puzzles, if you can even call them that, held back by a lack of any actual mobility. Thankfully, on our second visit to the ship right before the big finish, this features a lot more running and gunning action, absolutely wiping the floor with these all-powerful beings. It's also cool getting to use some of Jak's special abilities, even if it's only brief. The ending here is great though. After the planetary defense weapon blasts that thing out of the sky and Cyber Errol escapes in the terraformer, the duo have to escape while the entire ship crumbles around them. An awesome moment to set up the final act of the game. Another moment that lands just as well takes place in the abandoned research rig of Lost Frontier. Trust me, this is cool. We enter to find a dark eco-testing facility, just the same as the one where Jak was tortured by Baron Praxis. It's a very neat callback and helps to craft this story of wrongful dark eco experimentation. The rest of our time here is spent solving teleportation puzzles and defending ourselves from the dark mutants and spiders as we platform from the laboratory into the caves. Outside, we can see this place actually has a decent design, suspended on the cliffs of a waterfall on the edge of existence. But, as we all know by now, the aerial combat missions here are not worth writing home about. For number 63, we've got the construction site. In Jak 2, this place only serves purpose for a single, crucial cutscene in the game's later moments. Rumour has it, there were greater plans here that were ultimately cut, but thankfully, the level reached its potential in Daxter, where we get to glide down zip lines, bounce around on netting, and use the various cranes and structures to navigate. This game really does a good job at making the world feel massive in scale, and you really start to feel that while exploring here. The second portion of this map, hanging around waiting to spray some bugs, is really boring, but when we return later on in the game, the platforming challenge has been stepped up with more interesting combinations of mechanics, like climbable walls, moving platforms, and using the spray gun to fly around. The mildly open area at the end has some hives to destroy, and I wish we'd seen more of that from this location. Overall though, this is a fun map to play through. The specific details on Precursor lore are a bit fuzzy. Ha! But it's cool to think that there is an entire tube network buried deep within the Earth to transport between A and B. We get to drive this hover dealie and shoot at stuff while trying not to get killed along the way. It's fun, but far too short to leave much of an impact. When we reach the catacomb entrance below the collapsed palace in the final stretch of the game, somehow this time it's even less involved, easier, and shorter again, feeling more like the introduction to a major story cutscene that follows, rather than an actual level. That was a big flaw with Jak 3, too many different things that led to potentially cool gimmicks like this without enough time to make them any good. We can see a very similar scenario from Precursor Legacy, as Jak and Daxter have to cross the Fire Canyon on Kirazuma to reach the Rock Village. The mechanics here are more interesting, as we need to manage our heat by popping cooling balloons and doing our best to keep off of the ground, while also remaining on the hunt for orbs and scout flies. Another brief location that still manages to stay with you long after your visit. We can see the evolution of this course later on with the Lava Tube, which is a longer variation and features more twisted geography and even an open chamber with things to shoot at. My personal favourite section is the dilapidated walkways that snake above a pool of pure fiery doom, and the final section avoiding mines and dark eco canisters. The music is also much livelier for this one, and it leads into the finale inside Golden Maya's Citadel just perfectly, with some fun and bouncy gameplay. One bizarre detail to this map is the shortcut through this molten river, which seemingly serves no purpose. There is no hidden collectible in here or anything. It's so strange. I am legitimately only finding out about this for the first time while discussing this level, by the way. I can't believe I never noticed this in all of my years playing this game. But that is the mark of a quality title when it still offers new discoveries years after you first play it. Oh, now here we fucking go. Strap in and strap on, because it's time to discuss Jak 2's Water Slums. Now, this is a very small section to part of a much larger district on the map, but I can really appreciate the design here. The rundown shacks and walkways above what I can only assume is murky water filled with the trash of this city beneath it. It's our gateway to the pumping station, and also features the Precursor Oracle, who grants Jak with dark abilities in exchange for Metalhead Skull Gems. But aside from that, there wouldn't be much to say about this place if it wasn't for this bastard-ass mission. Okay, calm down. You can get through this, Jak. Basically what happens is we're sent to collect an important seal piece located here, only to be ambushed by the Crimson Guard. And when I say ambushed, I mean Jesus fucking Christ. All of this for one guy? Wow. They must think I'm a real threat. This mission would not be so difficult mowing down the soldiers if it wasn't for these gunships directly above your only walkway that are just relentless to pass by. And there are like 10 of them. Hoverboarding away on the water doesn't work unless you're lucky enough to enter this mission with Dark Jak fully charged and are able to destroy that little robot. But if you don't have that, then you are shit out of luck. And the best part about this mission for 8-year-old square-eyed Jak is that the game auto-saves and locks you to the beginning of this event, meaning you can't even leave to do something else until you beat it. And the only way to do it is to fucking do it. But I must say, while this is an incredible difficulty spike, it's created a moment that many of us can still remember like it was yesterday. So for that reason, it does have its place and cements this location as one of the more noteworthy of the entire series. Towards the end of Jak 2, as the Metalheads invade Haven City and the streets become a war zone, it's our responsibility to go down under the port on a search and rescue mission for our old pal Sig. Although, when you see that mech suit waiting for you, it does make you want to leave him for dead, I'm gonna be honest. This first part is kind of neat though, navigating around the various mines and underwater ruins, punching metalheads, and it's all very, very pretty. Platforming in this thing is pretty shit, but not long after, we meet up with Sig and work to evade this crazy bugger as we escape through the tunnels. The puzzles are a bit lame, and it's all for nothing because Sig gets himself killed anyway. Spoiler alert, but for a one and done location, it does serve its purpose well. Moving on now to Jak 3, our first taste of gameplay here sees us in the battle arena, brushing up on our moveset before getting a gun and killing things like we never missed a step. There are several visits here to earn new weapons while also trying to impress Deimos and earn citizenship into Spargus, this outcast settlement deep within the harsh wasteland. Oh, and also, Sig is here, and we get to be reunited, because spoiler alert, he actually didn't die from that scene in the previous level, somehow. For narrative purposes, this battle arena is okay, but why we don't get to come back here and do further side objectives like Ratchet & Clank's battle arena, I will never understand. Huge missed opportunity there if you ask me, especially for a gimmick already seen in the game. Now, prior to Haven City falling during the war, we actually get to visit this level on 2 separate occasions. Our second visit has us on a desperate mission to stop Baron Praxis from attempting to crack the Precursor Stone, and after getting Ashelon on our side, we need to escape through the waves of soldiers towards the exit. It's really cool getting to see out through the large windows to the city below. Smashing the place up and being under constant fire makes for a wicked tense level so late in the game. We even get to use the hoverboard to navigate certain obstacles, which really helps to create a dynamic, flowing environment to run through. But it just doesn't last long enough, as it's not long before we're out of here. Quite the underutilized set piece if you ask me, considering it's the prime landmark of the entire franchise. Some of you are probably wondering how there is still Lost Frontier maps appearing, and I know it's a bit of a shock, but the older open barracks is actually a bit of fun. Outside is where we have that missile defense BS that we're not discussing further because my PTSD just can't deal with that right now. But moving inside, it's just a sprint through a barrage of dark eco-freaks, getting into one of those plastic sphere thingies and rolling around shooting stuff. It's a nice fast-paced action level. At some point there is a roadblock of barriers we have to teleport puzzle to get past, and it ends off with a huge massacre inside the internal bunker. This game lacks a lot of things, but when it gets this much right, it actually starts to seem half decent. Until you go back outside and have to do the damn missile. No, we're moving on now. Just outside the walls of Haven City lies a little piece of untouched wilderness. A quiet, serene place crawling with flying metalheads, crab metalheads, and invisible crab metalheads that want to shoot holes in you. The missions here aren't much to get excited about, with the hunt to find and destroy all of the hidden enemies being the highlight. The terrain here is ideal for use with the hoverboard, and there are some interesting locations such as the fort and the huge tree, but it's an otherwise very tame location. I do enjoy seeing how young Samos comes here with the Life Seed to look into the future while we protect him from a Crimson Guard attack. How did they know we were here though? And hey, maybe if you stopped trying to ambush us all the time, you'd have enough men on the front lines to win this war with the metalheads. It is a nice change of pace from the concrete jungle most of the game takes place in, but there are far superior forests that we're yet to see on this list. In the top corner of Maintown sits another of Haven's most notable points of interest, the stadium area. I decided this was deserving enough of its own spot on the list for the very different missions that take place here. In the final stretch of the game, we've got to defend the Sages as they transport the Rift Rider from an attack of metalheads, but it's what happens inside the stadium that lends the most interest. We've got to compete in several races that take place here over the course of the story, with both Jak and Daxter taking the wheel. Controls on these knife cars are a pain in the ass, but for such short courses, there is a lot of tight action to be had here. But this place is also home to a rad skate park, and you all know me, I can't get enough of the gnarly grinds, radical ramps, and awesomely flowing fun that can be had in this place. There is nothing else like it in this game, so to say it's kind of out of place is certainly an understatement, but who cares? It's always a blast ripping up the stadium in one way or another. Back to the basics with Geyser Rock, our introduction to Precursor Legacy. This is our training ground where we get to learn the ins and outs of this fluid moveset for the first time, so it's a very simple level but highly memorable and efficient to run. It's such a lush location, absolutely brimming with detail, and shows off the technical marvel of this game perfectly, as you can see the rest of this new world just waiting for you off on the horizon. And for such a compact space, we sure do get to travel up, in, and around all of the vibrant cliff walls. It's actually stunning just to see how many little elements are featured here, all mashed in together to create a whopper introduction to this new franchise and its expert level design. We haven't seen much of Daxter so far through this list, and we're quickly approaching the halfway point of the video, so if that doesn't show you we're in for a treat with this game, I don't know what will. Definitely not this prison level though, let me tell you. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's okay. It starts off hot with a zoomer chase with a guard close on your tail, but the big problem here is the stealth this level requires. For the most part, it's just simple timing-based patterns, but I find it to be a bit finicky and fussy at times, and it's really frustrating getting caught. Thankfully, Daxter can crawl through small spaces to link between different cells, and there are some decent sections here that mix things up. But I hate this room above the dark eco. You need to heat these things up with your flamethrower to get them to move, but there are collectibles obnoxiously placed so that you have to spend as much time as possible collecting them all. And being the final level of the game, it all ends with a decent 3-stage fight against this crazy metalhead dodging attacks, flying to reach safety, and blowing shit up. The best way to finish off any game. And on the topic of finishing, it's time to finish off the last of our Lost Frontier levels. Far Drop here was one of the few locations in this game that showed true potential to be something much greater. A pirate city tucked away in this awesome looking cavern with rope bridges and other contraptions used to navigate the vertical terrain? It gives me some real Donkey Kong Country vibes, combining both Treetop Town and the tunnels seen in Chimp Caverns. Which is admittedly the nicest thing anyone has ever said about this location or this game in general. And trust me, I'm not proud of it, but it is true. Unfortunately, our actual goals here are oftentimes incredibly tedious and uninspired. This one boss fight inside the tavern is mindless combat over and over again. But it's the ship battle out in the greater cavern area that is a really cool moment, and one that really makes me believe that in any other game, Far Drop would make for an absolute winner. In at 49, we've got the Daxter Unleashed levels that appear sporadically throughout the course of this game. Daxter somehow gets even more mutated from the dark eco and goes all Tasmanian devil, spinning up a tornado through the various underground facilities, sewers, laboratories, and spider caves. These play out more like combat puzzle levels, with various mechanisms to master so that you can pass by. These show up enough to get a feel for them, but not so much that it gets tired, which is good, but it is stupid how Daxter is always fine afterwards, and nobody reacts to anything like real human beings. God, look into their eyes! Does anyone in this game have a soul? Dark Eco Daxter is a product of its time for sure, an exhausted brain fart of an idea, but, you know, it's not the worst thing imaginable. And the final level we have to take a look at from Lost Frontier is Brink Island, the location where our team crash lands in the beginning of the game. It looks great, terrain literally perched on the edge of creation, though it does have far too many grey tones for a map of this forest theme. Our second visit after a second crash landing has us running through destroying the robot inhabitants, avoiding falling trees, and eventually reaching the treehouse. The occupant Tim, also known as Castaway, sends us off to shut down his master robot to retrieve an important item so that we can repair our ship. By this game's standards, it is a decent little boss fight for what it is, and all of this sums up why the world-building lore of this game should be considered canon by the fans, despite the lack of overall quality we see in this game. A very inspired location, but one that, thankfully, closes out this chapter of our ranking, so that now we can finally start to move into the really good stuff. We started this ranking on the weaker side of Haven City's various districts. Well, it's time to finally introduce one of the more frequently seen areas of the map, the industrial sector towards the eastern border. Along with being featured heavily over the course of Jak 2's campaign, more so as a transitional area between the slums and port, it's the only location in the series to appear as you see it here across 3 separate games. As I mentioned, there isn't a whole lot going on here in number 2. Speeding through on your zoomer, chasing or being chased, it features several entrances to the sewer system underneath the city and is home to the power station, which becomes a key location for the series. During the course of Daxter, the above ground walkways get a little more use, and it's interesting to see the location on this grander scale. Then, when our heroes return during the war, while this place has certainly seen better days prior to the tower collapse, it is still very much the same and features a lot more heavily with its own distinct missions, shutting down the turrets, blowing up power boxes with Jinx, and even controlling a KG deathbot through the battleground to break through the barricades on the other side. For what it lacks in innovative design, it more than makes up for it with those moments, and was the perfect location to get our first look at this dystopian future. In Daxter, the industrial sector is also home to the West Side Hotel. Why it's called that, being on the eastern side of town, I have no clue, but it serves as our first day on the job of bug extermination. We make our way through the gardens, which just look amazing, and slowly climb up to the interior, where we find that the place is incredibly run down. Given Crew seems to be the only regular tenant, it's safe to assume this is almost some kind of front for illegal activity. Or maybe it's because these giant holes in the floor are the only space wide enough for Crew to get inside this place. I don't know. It's a lot of fun getting to see this though and bounce around like old tons of fun on the big boy's bed, and the entire level does an excellent job at introducing both the gameplay and scale of Daxter's own game. Plus, who can argue with a fun slide at the end of any level? Whee! Another Daxter level is the distillery. While theming of this one is far more stock and uneventful, being an underground series of tunnels, it's just really solid in the gameplay department. Lots of variety in the maneuvers you need to perform in order to make it through alive, and given it takes place in such a standard environment, hanging from moving crates and the big climb to avoid a rising pool of liquid helps these moments to really stand out within this playthrough. I don't really have much else to say on this one, to be honest. It's just simple, done well across the board. Back outdoors, let's take a stroll through the slums and take in all of the wonderful things to see. The neon billboard, the ghetto buildings, the turrets that shoot at you, and propaganda. I think Naughty Dog really nailed the poverty look this area has going for it. All of the missions here naturally have an added feeling of desperation, understanding that there are a lot of innocent civilians in this part of the city, so defending homes from deathbots and helping to keep people safe is a priority of survival. The slums are home to the underground movement against Baron Praxis, and it's where a lot of key character moments take place, making it a strong contender in the ranks for its importance alone. Its snaking hallway design is unfortunately the result of early open world game design from a technical standpoint, which is its biggest letdown. But while it may not always be your favourite place on the map, I think it's hard to deny the homely feel it strangely gives you. Right on the slums border is where we find the Crimson Guard Fortress. We've already seen this location from Daxter's perspective, but it's when he meets up with Jak after the Dark Eco experiments that this location gets good. Atmosphere! This place fucking nails the atmosphere on all fronts. The quiet music sends chills down your spine with the metallic sounds off in the distance as you begin your escape. The colours are daunting, and the moments where you encounter guards are unforgettable and perfect this early on in the game. I mean, look at this scene right here. I think it's safe to assume the visual of guards shooting up through the floor is permanently scanned into our brains. Unfortunately, our next visit here is permanently scarred into our brains as we have to outrun this bastard asshole tank, which is some bullshit for an 8-year-old. The spike in difficulty so early on is what keeps this location from scoring higher, but once you overcome this, the rest of the level is very well done. And the final visit much later on is to rescue our friends, but out of the 3 different parts to this map, the last time is without question the weakest, as the location loses a lot of the great atmospheric qualities it excelled at previously. Another level that is very similar in design is the weapons factory. The entire thing is a great combination of balancing offense and defense against the seemingly limitless number of bad guys you have to get through, along with the conveyor belt switch puzzles and not burning through all of your ammunition too early on. For some reason, there is no music while you're here, which is really strange. I guess they were trying to create a very dramatic and tense sprint to make this location stand out, but it makes it a bit boring as there is very little energy. Thankfully, this location is saved with the quality confrontation with crew at the top of this facility as we fight off his gooey spawn? Ew, that's gross. But the fight has a strong pace to it that ramps up well, and it closes with the piercer bomb exploding into oblivion. Boom! And also, crew was there too. A location in no way unique that still manages to deliver on many levels. And speaking of many levels, we have officially hit the halfway mark of this every level ranked. Wow, that went by really fast this time. But we've still got a way to go, so now would be a great time to go and refill your snacks, maybe even stand up and have a nice stretch. You know, get the blood moving through your body, and while you're at it, be sure to drop a like on this video and share it with a friend if you've enjoyed it so far. Alright, we've had a moment to regroup, now let's keep this ball rolling with number 41. The Precursor Basin from the first Jak Daxter. On a personal level, I've never really enjoyed this map, but looking at it from a technical perspective alongside every other level, it is actually quite a strong addition to the lineup, hence why it's in the upper half of the rankings. But only barely. The entire thing takes place on the Zoomer, flying around this temple area, completing races through the interior, ring challenges on the exterior, clearing infected plants, and rescuing these little rat things. Being blind, you have to chase them around and try to direct them back into their burrows, but good luck with that because they never go where you want them to. Oh, come on, get in there! Oh, you piece of shit. Makes me wish I could just hit them with the propeller on the front of this thing and get it over with. The pillars and arch design of the terrain does make it a fun place to navigate though, and it's a nice change of pace next to the standard platformer collecting. Once we pass the rock village and use the Blue Sage's laser to move the boulder, we climb the cliffside to meet face to face with Claw. This is a very decent boss battle for what is really a very formulaic, super retro throwback to boss battles of a previous era. Avoid attacks, run and get in a hit, rinse and repeat. But the music is awesome, which is why it was reused for the credits. Once Claw gets conked out, we hit the mountain pass on the Zoomer in a race through the woodland hills, over large gaps and through a mine littered with TNT to reach the end before the entire level gets blown up. It can still offer some challenge if you're not strict with the controller, and much like the previous area, is designed to be a fun, free-flowing location. This of course leads into the Volcanic Crater, which was a terrible hub, so let's take a look at Sandover Village, the vastly superior of all the hub locations and our first introduction to the world of Jak Daxter. There is honestly no other location in the series like this, visiting the various huts to meet with people who give us quests in exchange for power cells. We can even trade and find other collectibles hidden around. Yeah, just go into the mayor's home, which is a windmill, and steal his shit. It's just so quaint. Until you have to move those bastard yak owl back into their pens. Move your thick bum, you stupid animal! Between this and wanting to chop up rats with a propeller, this game is not vegan friendly. Even though there are far more exciting locations lower down this list, Sandover just does an excellent job at steadily teaching us the collectathon format and encourages exploration in a safe space to get familiar with the game. The music and overall design is also incredibly iconic, making this place truly special. There is a reason we'd eventually see this appear in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, because it's just so awesome. One of the more standout levels seen in Daxter absolutely has to be the eco-tanker that is docked in the port area. It's great to see a ship like this from the perspective of Orange Lightning, and it offers a lot of fun gameplay, taking out bugs, platforming amongst the mess of crates, hopping across rigging, and using these trampolines to spring all over the place. Moving down inside, we're up against a lot more machinery and dark corridors, which give this place some variety. The puzzle at the end is kind of stupid, but on our second visit, we're in a constant rush to get in, blow the place up, and get the hell out. But the final segment here is what stops this from appearing higher on the list. I don't know what it is about this zipline, but it's just a pain in the ass sometimes. It's long, some of the obstacles have weird depth perception, and if you die at any point, you get reset all the way back here, so you have to constantly redo this part. Aside from that hiccup though, this is a great industrial location, a theme the series always executed well. Right after this, we sneak our way into the Baron's Palace, which is a location we've already seen. But man, did Daxter knock this location out of the park. I don't know how anyone can live in this place with all of the death traps everywhere, but they do make for some rad and clever platforming challenge that requires the full knowledge of Daxter's moveset. And it also makes for a great aesthetic out in the garden. The library section though, Jesus, it just never ends, and it's a bit dull to drone through, not gonna lie. But then we reach the treasure room, and I'm reminded that every game ever should have a treasure room. It's so cool. All up, this is just a solid map that takes everything we've learned through the game and applies it to a pure gameplay focused map. And its purpose to the narrative also can't be ignored, tying the story of Jak 2 and 3 together with little effort. Great stuff. Far out into the harsh wasteland lies a Metal-pede Cave, where Jak and Sig team up to demolish the entire thing. I love this location. The twisted architecture of the tunnels formed over time, that bopping soundtrack, and storming through with this beastly monster of a vehicle shooting at everything is just a huge power trip. It's also one of the only vehicle-oriented stages in the series to utilise some form of levolution with destructive pillars to create bridges and breakaway platforms that drop you into thick mud. There are so many fun nooks and crannies to explore, and going up against the Metal-pedes is cool too. But when the cave gets filled with toxic gas, I swear it wasn't me this time guys, the race out through the green smog tests your knowledge of the layout so you can escape in time. Underrated would be a term I'd have to use to describe it and the missions that take place here, because not enough people talk about how memorable these are. There's not much to see beyond the walls of Haven City in the third game, but by travelling to the border of the Metal-pede district leads to the entrance of South Haven Forest. Instead of green tones, this area is sharp with vibrant reds and yellows. Is it autumn, or are these plants dying from the toxic landscape nearby, or the infected plants that inhabit the area? Like a lot of the natural locations we've seen recently, this place is built for smooth, fast action with so many cool hoverboard spots and ring challenges that can be a challenge, but one that makes you proud to overcome. But it's all about unlocking the mysteries of this forest that helps to cement it in your mind. Seeing the precursor pillars rise from the lake, and how much importance is placed on reconstructing the telescope so that we can get a good look at the Dark Makers coming to destroy us. And then suddenly they arrive and we have to defend this location in some serious combat. This was a roadblock for me when I was younger, but despite that, I could just never get past the richness of this place and how integral to saving the world it becomes. That map was gorgeous, so that must mean it's time to shift our attention to a beautifully disgusting and foul level with Boggy Swamp from Precursor Legacy. Now this place is dank. Let's just get that right out in the open so the stink can escape a bit. It's definitely one of the stronger toilet bowls I've seen from any series, with lots of branching paths defined by gnarled branches, thorn bushes covering difficult platform segments, and lots of critters to annihilate with fireballs. It's got a great atmosphere, especially thanks to that soundtrack, and the objective of going around destroying the anchors on the lurker blimp makes this a landmark that can be seen from all corners of the map, which never ceases to blow my mind. We also meet Boggy Billy here, who is always a huge crowd pleaser.
Judging by the smell, I'd wager your bathtub sank in the mud long ago.
What's a bathtub?
In this larger area is where we get to ride around on Flut Flut, which only happens one other time in the game, so it's got some mechanics here that are unique to this location. A location that stands very tall on this list, and we've still got plenty more to come that can top it. I've already said that Jak and Daxter's industrial locations are one of its strongest points. A big reason behind that is the drill platform. Look at this contraption! This really is post-apocalyptic type shit, literally demolishing the earth for precious eco-resources. It plays out with a lot of peril as you try not to fall off the edges, and there is just so much cool machinery around here to play with. Elevators, cranes that can be destroyed to create walkways, all the Crimson Guard jetpack guys flying around shooting at you, and the foundry area covered in hot flames. One thing that does let this down, however, is the excessive use of turrets. Stationary or in motion, it gets old quickly, but the flip side of that is the mission destroying an eco-tanker proves that this is the perfect location for rebel activity, living up to the Renegade subtitle. Then of course there is the mech suit section that appears later on. It sucks for sure, but it does give it variety, as no visit is ever exactly the same. On a similar note, but on a much different scale, we've also got the dig site from Jak 2, with another drill mining inside this cave. Destroying the flimsy rope supports with some rad board slides is always fun, seeing that thing flail out of control. But by exploring deeper into the complex discovers what I could only describe as an underground encampment with little huts littered all over the ceiling and natural robotic platforms of tree trunks and spikes, walkways, and even aircraft that you can hang from. What a design this place has going for it. Infested with metalheads gives us plenty to shoot at and many memorable gameplay moments. Just tread with caution, because it's easy to get your ass burned. Or worse.
Looks dodgy up there! Don't hurt yourself, Jak! It's a curse, isn't it?
On to a more serious tone, here we have the Metalhead Wasteland, which is the big finale of Jak 2, what this entire game has been leading up to. After Metal Core reveals himself and we secure the Precursor Stone, it's off to the Wasteland on a one-way ticket. It's dark, abysmal, and incredibly contorted. The environment has a real German expressionism vibe to it that totally kicks ass, and after blowing a front door directly into the nest, we've got a long hike to reach it, swarming with a large roster of different enemies, some of which we've never seen anywhere else in this game. I always loved the look of these big guys, just don't stand too close. For a location with a simple layout, it still manages to stand out despite this, and the challenge factor, I'd say, is very balanced here, which is appreciated after some of the difficulty spikes we've seen throughout this game. When you finally enter the nest, suddenly, we've got a lot more vibrancy to the colour palette, blistered with a lot of greens and purples, heading into the final encounter with this freaky dude. This may not be the best boss fight the series has seen, as it can be a little awkward at times trying to balance offense and defense, and also directing the cameraman, but it is still a lot of fun and certainly makes up for its shortcomings with pure adrenaline-fueled intensity. From the end of Jak 2 and onto the start of Jak 3, our team is banished to the wasteland where they're rescued by Deimos and brought back to Spargus, a desert town of outcasts built to survive. You've got to be tough to stay around here for long. Now admittedly, there isn't much to really say on this one, as it is more of a general hub. That said, we do get quite a lot of missions that take place here. Feeding the leaper lizards, racing the leaper lizards, jumping on people's heads with leaper lizards and watching riots break out. So, lots of hot reptile action as you can see, but by far one of the most memorable missions of the entire game takes place when the Darkmakers invade, causing outright chaos as we have the responsibility of defending against these large War of the Worlds-esque monsters from atop this turret by the ocean. It's such a cool moment, and along with some other parts of the game, is what makes this such an important location to the world-building narrative. And design-wise, I mean, come on, this town looks so cool. Unlike the districts of Haven City, it even features a lot of collectibles scattered around that require knowledge of your abilities, making this an incredibly well done hub area. But as just one part of the wasteland as a whole, we've got to have the entire sprawling desert placed just a little higher. Now you're probably curious, how is it fair to have such a huge location that absorbs so much of this game compared to so many other smaller locations? Well, a few reasons. Firstly, Haven City has clear styles between its different districts, whereas this is just one big sand island. And secondly, there isn't much of fuck all to really see out here as far as landmarks go. There is of course the town where Daxter herds the baby lizards, the Marauder camp out on the river, the oasis where we meet Ashlyn and fight the Darkmaker satellite, but one of the best has to be the decaying rusted bridges that make for some great leaps of faith amidst a sandstorm or artifact race. I know a lot of people aren't too fond on the heavy vehicle content here, but there is so much variety that this place stands tall in my opinion. So much rad shit goes down here that simply can't be ignored, and this level acts not just as a defining location in this franchise, but also for the Mad Max aesthetic being completely reborn and taking over modern media. And it really has taken over, and I blame Jak 3 for that because it's one of the very few examples of it being done this well. Screaming across the dunes is so much fun, but no vehicle in the series is quite as unique next to the Dune Hopper. Launching and shooting through the sky. Of course, you know where this is leading. One of the biggest landmarks of the wasteland is this small island that you have to hop across to reach the Monk Temple, and on our first visit here, we get to scale these great walls. Now admittedly, this spot could be grouped with the broader locations they inhabit, but since it's a one-off that doesn't occur at any other point, I'd really like to commemorate how neat this mission is with its own spot on the list. The pure platforming climb amidst the collapsing platforms and flagpoles to swing from is a lot of fun navigating your way to the top. What you'll find is an abandoned monk glider, meaning it's time for liftoff. Now this is such a cool moment. Flying above the wasteland at this earlier point in the game gives you a great perspective on the world, and it's awesome getting to see the sights. Using the gusts of wind and power rings to stay afloat, this whimsical journey to the Great Volcano is another much underappreciated moment in my opinion. Reaching the end and crash landing inside the cavern leads us into our next spot perfectly. Venturing into battle against metal heads, using a leaper lizard to traverse a hot and steamy terrain, even Daxter gets some time to shine, hanging around on monkey bars, surprisingly annihilating giant monsters in a single hit, and even getting to do this fun slide. For your typical fire level, there is a lot of green and earthy tones in its design to make the path feel a lot more dynamic, which is nice, and a lot of the visual storytelling when you eventually stumble across the dead monk is very spooky. Even as an adult, it's unnerving, as it sets the tone of impending doom and destruction by example. Originally I had number 26, Jak 2's Mountain Temple, placed a little higher, but then I remembered. The Rock Slide. By far, this is one of the most utterly stunning locations, with the rich bronze precursor structures piercing through the greenery with a delicately calm soundtrack. So what a disgrace that we only come here once throughout the entire game. On a hunt for some very important items, we tackle the 3 different paths head on to encounter large beast fights, platforming challenges, the damn rock slide, which can be a real fussy bitch sometimes, and, the box puzzle above a pool of dark eco. I don't know how many times I've done this in my lifetime. I always spend at least 15 minutes here like a total numpty trying to solve this thing. But that's it. The only time we return is to construct a light tower that shows the location of Mars' tomb, meaning this wonderful piece of wilderness is primarily used as a gateway into the much less impressive Haven Forest. I'm disappointed in you, Naughty Dog. Really wasted this amazing location. Elsewhere in Haven City, Daxter has to navigate the cooler box in the fish canning plant, hopping across icy rivers and using his flamethrower to melt ice blocks to create paths and platforms to jump on. Not to mention, crawling around amongst the fish guts through the mincer between the different rooms. This level has a great combination of platformer puzzle challenge that starts indoors and eventually moves outside to some much larger spaces. Watch out for the big fish because they'll gobble you right up. We don't see many levels that focus on the frozen snow theme in the franchise, with only Snowy Mountain from the first game, Icelands in Jak X Combat Racing, and here with the Fish Cannery in Daxter. So to say that this is a rare specimen is certainly an understatement, and what really completes it is the strong and consistent quality in both design and gameplay. What can I say to introduce Misty Island? It's the most cliché, spooky level I've ever seen in a game, but there is a reason why that is. Because it's so damn effective. As a launching pad for our protagonists becoming heroes, it does a great job setting up the events of the game with a look at our mysterious villains, and after a quick swim in Dark Eco, sells that this is a location to be wary of. Once we help the fisherman and get access to his boat, finally we return to the dry, dead landscape here. It's like the boneyard from Lion King in design that is literally breaking down as you explore. Here is where we find the Sculptor's Muse, fight the big bad lurkers in the arena, and hop on the zoomer to cover ground on the ocean. It's a nice open space to help give us something different, and taking over the ship and climbing the bockety scaffolding to the top of this map makes for a warm sense of completion to clear the cold fog. 100% iconic. What more needs to be said? Even though we were unfamiliar with our antagonists upon first arriving on Misty Island, later learning that these dark eco freaks are the only solution in saving Daxter, we charge full force into Golenmeyer's Citadel to rescue the eco sages and save the world. The visuals of this giant robot in the centre and the harsh industrial tones to the soundtrack make for an intimidating final gauntlet that tests you on all of your abilities learned throughout the game. Master the blue eco chamber with launch pads and switches, combat enemies with red and yellow eco, and just try not to fall off of these weird pizza platforms. That's what they always looked like to me, a big bunch of floating pizzas. Give me a break, okay? We're like an hour into this thing and I'm starting to get hungry. But the really cool moment is ascending up the mechanical mess high in this chamber, then finally riding the elevator up to the top of the eco silos. This is where we fight the precursor bot, and it's by far one of the best battles Jak and Daxter ever saw. It's still simple, yet so much fun, and the thunderous booms of the soundtrack sell the gravity of this moment so well. Finally destroying the Twisted Sisters and celebrating on top of the world, looking back at the epic journey we've just completed. Our epic journey through these levels, however, is still not over yet, but we are getting close now. 60 levels down, 22 more to go. Up next is Haven Sewers from Jak 3. Personally, I've never been a huge fan of this place, given how frequently we had to visit, which was only made worse over time by how many playthroughs I had of this game growing up. But my personal feelings aside, they're certainly some of the more well-designed and consistent areas in the game. The pipes make for some great hoverboarding, heavy water flowing in areas makes it easy to find yourself in a tough spot, and I just love how these KG robots explode into pieces when you hit them. There sure is a lot of automated platforms and wind turrets, cages, trapdoors, and automated sentries too. But the sewers are also one of the only locations to have a lot of hidden rooms with treasures to find, which I never thought I'd say makes spending time in this musty sewer feel rewarding for your efforts. Okay, who remembers this place? I'm sure Daxter flew under the radar for a lot of people being a PSP exclusive, and the lumber mill was absolutely a sleeper hit for this game. Appearing towards the end, this sexy autumn lumber mill makes for a great open, non-linear place to explore, and it's got everything from zip lines, saw blades penetrating walkways, logs floating down a river that you have to hop across, and lily pads that are essential landing space while floating around. The goal here, as usual, is to exterminate all the metal bugs, but take all that away, and what remains is just a super fun little area that's not so little at all once you get into it. And of course, it all ends with a slide down the enormous log flume. Whee! What the fuck was that? Time for number 20, people. That top 10 is creeping up on us real fast here. Dead Town is our first taste of triumph upon arriving to the city as we explore the ruins of the old city, climb a giant tower that is probably an insurance nightmare, get the flag on top, and somehow survive certain death, just to join in the underground movement. How many corpses of aspiring members are floating in that mud down below? Seriously. Ruins always make for a solid grouping of fun gameplay and great aesthetics in any game, with the decayed buildings sitting infested with metalheads and even what remains of Samos's hut. That detail is what defines the plotline through this entire series, taking it from your simple kids game into a mature and epic time-traveling saga. Also, that fucking mech suit is back here. God damn it, you ruin everything! I had this placed a little higher, but then you showed up, and now I can't. I can't go any higher than 20. I'm sorry. It's a really cool location when you're 8 years old, sitting alone in the dark, getting creeped out by that plank of wood that falls over. What a jump scare. And what a little bitch. We've only got the best prize fighters in front of us now, people. In at number 19 is the port in South Haven City, the biggest and most frequent district appearing in Jak 2, Jak 3 and Daxter respectively. And it's an example of the more things change, the more they stay the same. Home to both the Hip Hog Saloon and Gun Course, an essential spot to hang out if you want to hang with the big boys, the port area itself may not feature much in level design, but the missions it's home to are all unforgettable. Zooming around on the water like Jesus destroying mines, hunting down death bots like a Terminator, and that's before Jak, as a standalone warrior, defends the entire area from attack all by himself. Wow, what a hero. Give that guy a medal because that mission roadblocked me for a week when I was younger, forcing me to return this game to the video store without finishing it. And most famously, the port is where 90% of the missile actions take place, with both Daxter riding around on them and trying to get away from them by lighting up decoys. Again, what it may lack in actual level structure, there are so many moments here, and when Jak 3 came along, it gave this place new life, allowing you to even climb the 2 towers and grind along the high wires collecting precursor orbs. It may seem uneventful on its own, but most of this series was made from this location. Time for another under the radar hit from Daxter. Did you know Haven City has an underground transit system? The map features an abundance of clever platforming hazards while riding on top of trains, hopping from one to the next, and avoiding electric barriers. These things really fly down the tunnels that it can be hard to keep up at times, but it's such a balanced challenge so it doesn't become an issue. The various walkways and generator rooms, things of that nature, snake around the tunnels to give you that feeling of progression, like you're actually going somewhere when you can see the level in front and behind you. Later on, we have to outrun a train on the zoomer before it crashes, blasting open a doorway into a boss fight. This might be the weakest of the boss fights in this game, but there is nothing majorly wrong with it, so the transit system is completed as one of the best pure platforming stages in all of this franchise. Not only were we at war with the metalheads and dark precursors in Jak 3, but the city has also been sieged by an army of Crimson Guard robots. I think it's interesting seeing these very rarely in Jak 2, before the weapons program truly boomed with the floating KG War Factory. This is just an excellent set piece, constantly visible from the ground, so getting the opportunity to actually fly up there and attack the front doors makes for such a gnarly moment. Outside we're gliding around, taking out weapons and other artillery with lots of gunfire and bombs from a perspective of Haven City we don't get to see too often. Moving indoors, and still, the perilous heights can be dizzying when you look past the platforms. We have to simply make our way through the various chambers, destroying these robots, and occasionally doing some more monkey bar segments with Daxter to activate switches, before finally reaching the end, where we find this little card. That is then used, of course, to fucking smash your way back through the entire factory again. That's wicked, dude. I would have placed this higher had it not been for the Daxter gameplay getting a little bit tired and killing the pace, but it still scores high for the amazing finale where we finally meet face to face with Cyber Errol for the first time. Wow, what a nut. And this boss fight is one of the best the series ever saw, with lots going on, missiles that destroy the floor, waves that you need to jump over, and a large variety of enemies. An excellent one-time location that I wish we could have seen more of. Moving on now to the strip mine for number 16. I have the feeling people might be a bit confused as to why this level is so high on the list, given it's one of the smaller locations without much structure to its environment. But that's exactly why, because despite that, it manages to squeeze a lot of variety. On our first visit, we're simply running and gunning on our way to rescue Vin. You can take the longest or shortest path you like, and the containers getting carried over the gap makes for a great exposed position to defend yourself. Round 2 is much different in that we have to shoot around on the hoverboard and blow shit up within a very strict time limit. This introduces a lot of the more flowing cliffside design that takes what could have been a simple quarry and gives it some character through gameplay hazards. But the difficulty of this mission also introduces a challenge that is rewarding to overcome. And finally, we're on the hoverboard one more time, ascending to the higher reaches of the quarry and paths less travelled to drop a crate down and destroy some metalhead eggs. So all in all, plenty of variety and making the most of what can often be considered a tired location. Qualities that any good level should possess. But The strip mine from Daxter was just that little bit better. For the second time in these rankings, similar yet different locations we saw in Jak 2 have been outdone by the portable game. Wow. This time, the strip mine is treated much more like a maze complex, with a lot of long, snaking, underground hallways that lead out into larger caves, and even the occasional open quarries for more traditional collectathon gameplay. You need to master your tools to navigate the puzzle platforming, and it takes full advantage of Daxter's wide range of mobility and work it contextually into the level theme. And like any dig site, there has been a lot of treasures unearthed here, forcing you to explore every nook and cranny to clear the map. It never gets tired completing objectives through this unassumingly expansive level, and at the very end, we've got another boss battle against a giant metalhead monstrosity. This fight is better than the one we just saw in the transit system, and getting to see that sucker pop actually makes me kind of sad, because I wish we had more of this strip mine to uncover. Not only is this the end for the strip mine, but this is also the final stop for Daxter in the rankings. The best thing to come from Daxter, without question in my opinion, has got to be the brewery. Appearing earlier on in the story, this lands at that perfect magical moment when you're finally let loose with just the right amount of moves and mechanics where you're learning through the course design. With only your pesticide spray gun equipped, this is where we learn of its flammable capabilities, prior to the game just giving you a flamethrower and throwing a lot of this creative thinking out. We use it to burn up spider webs to clear a path, get a boost of extra height on our jumps, and glide for greater distances. Moving through steaming pipes, large crates, and climbing up the boiler with those dark, warm shades of reds make this otherwise dingy location stand out dramatically thanks to the saturated colours, and even while very simple, this entire location is really where Daxter peaked with its gameplay for a super fun level. You know, I've always found myself having quite mixed feelings on this game personally, but after seeing just how well these levels stack up next to the other classics we all remember, I can finally appreciate just how well done this game was, even if it did have its fair share of issues. It's not the first time I've changed my score for this game, so I'll try to make sure this is the last time, but Daxter on PSP is more than deserving of a strong 6 out of 10. With Daxter out of the way now, we've only got the main trilogy left, and only a handful of levels away from the top 10. Let's fucking do this, people. Up next is Mars Tomb from Jak 2, which acts as a central plot point of the game. We spend a lot of time trying to unlock it, and finally decide to brave the trials ahead. Tricky platforming, electrified pools, sound puzzles, and even Daxter getting chased by a giant spider. This was our first time ever controlling the character, and it's the only time in this game, so the tomb stands out for that moment alone, and of course, for being a tribute to Naughty Dog's former work. On an atmosphere level, if you're really into the lore behind this world, then Mars Tomb hits on so many levels with its architecture and more obscure moments, like the aforementioned musical puzzles. They're not the only puzzles either. We have to find marked items in a swarm of baby spiders, jump on blocks in the correct pattern, which is a callback to Golenmeyer's Citadel from the first game, but it's these musical notes that are truly in a league of their own. Once we pass the tests and unlock the inner sanctum, we're met by Baron Praxis, who steals the precursor stone right from our fingertips in an excellent battle, using the pillars to take cover from fire before they're destroyed, knocking his own bombs back to attack him. This boss and the entire labyrinth it takes place in offers such a strong variety of different gameplay elements that build on the lore and hit on everything that makes these games so highly addicting. This isn't the first time we face Baron Praxis, however, as earlier on in the game, we actually get to scale one of the tower support columns and cross the cable towards the palace. Now this is what you call a moment. It grants the player such a unique view of this new world that is truly unforgettable, made even better with the suspenseful music and limited space to work with while getting across this thing. At any point you could fall to your death, but the lure of wanting to get as close to the edge as you can just to get a good look to the city streets down below surprisingly triggers the conflicted feelings natural human curiosity would create in a real scenario like this. Fucking superb. As you make your way along, the sky grows darker and the rain starts to fall as we sneak onto the roof and are met by the Baron for the first in a series of excellent fights seen in this game. He's got the high ground and a lot of firepower for us to avoid, with the third phase in particular being a bitch with these fiery tornadoes, but it's still amazing all these years later as it was the first time you played it, cementing this symbol of the franchise into our minds. Now, just barely missing out on the top 10, number 11 on our list goes to the Monk Temple from Jak 3. I gave it a brief introduction earlier during the tower climb and glider segment, but this place is yet another major plot point for the lore and world building in Jak and Daxter games. At first, we can't gain entry, but after unlocking the dark invisibility power inside the Great Volcano, the door is finally open. And inside, a maze of wonders. So many different chambers, each with new trials, much like Mars' Tomb, only this time, a new visit unlocks a new area of the map that you soon discover are all connected and intertwined. Using the unique weapons to pass puzzles, taking a course on hoverboarding in a flooded cathedral, learning to fly above shattered columns, and even discovering the power to slow down time to pass difficult tasks. All of this leads us to the most central point of the temple, where a precursor idol lies dormant, waiting for a hero. So, if you can't tell from that, this place is the tits, nailing the various gameplay mechanics, teaching us through fun level design, and totally killing it in the presentation with stunning visuals and a mysteriously understated sound unlike any other. I really wish we had room for this in the top 10, but unfortunately, it's already absolutely stacked with quality. We've already seen so much amazing content come out of this franchise today that it's actually hard to fathom that there's even any more juice left in the tank after this. But, you know what they say, it's not over until the pecker sings.
From the mists of time, Mars' light would shine.
Okay, I hope you're strapped in, because it's finally time to announce your top 10 Jak and Daxter levels, starting off with number 10. The Sewers from Jak 2. Okay, now hang on a minute. I know you're upset. We all hate the escort mission in the sewer. I get it. Just give me a chance to explain myself here. I've talked a lot already about how amazing it is to see levels evolve over the course of a game's narrative and offer something new and different with additional visits. And after looking at every single level in this franchise, I strongly believe that none of them handle revisits better than this location. Our first time down here is on a simple mission to destroy the armed turrets, but that's not all we see on our first adventure. We get to see the dark and drab visuals that present themselves almost in a horror perspective, with dark shadows and monsters in sight, but impossible to see. Couple that with some stanky visuals that is actually what you want in a sewer level, and that quiet soundtrack that ramps up to 11 in the blink of an eye. And what you've got is a great first impression. On our return a long time later, now suddenly, our goal is to drain all of the water out here to reveal a hoverboard playground amongst the various ramps and twisted pipelines with heavy machinery and mines all over to get in our way as we resurrect the lost statue of Ma. That is two totally different kinds of level that drastically transforms this location. And now we've got the escort mission. And look, I know it can be hard. It's a shame Pretty Boy is the only one doing any of the actual work around here, but that's just how it is when you're the hero, okay? Now, not only do we have the added narrative of escorting this demolitions team back to the statue along the new path that we've created, but what we've also uncovered is a ravenous horde of metalheads for a tough gauntlet of combat action. And come on, the part where they're all crawling around on the ceiling is some genuinely freaky shit, okay? But it's just so cool. And at the end of the day, knowing how to use your arsenal and abilities to keep these things off you leaves Haven Sewer with what has to be the most talked about part of the entire franchise. So you cannot deny the memories this place created that far exceeded any one generation of gamers. Also, it's not that hard, guys. Get your shit together. In at number 9, we have the Eco Mine that leads us back into Haven City amidst the war. After travelling the subrail from the Monk Temple, we come out into an abandoned railway with rusted steel platforms coating the cliff walls. What's interesting here is we go down below into the mine shaft itself and have to activate a set of drills and other equipment by means of smacking the shit out of these rat things to get them to go into the hamster wheels. Who built this place? And why did they think to themselves, yes, hamster wheels are the technology of the future? Once you make it through and find the train car filled with explosives, we travel back through the extent of this railway and have to rebuild it while also platforming and hoverboarding our way back to where we first entered this place. It's a simple area, but I always really liked how it's so much greater than on the surface. We blast the shield door and reach another excellent boss fight, a rematch against the Precursor bot. This time he's jacked up with a laser sword, metallic beams that create pillars, and cannons that shoot a bunch of junk out to kill us. It's very fast paced with one of the more unique methods of any other bosses we've seen up until this point, and the Eco Mine as a whole is a whopper end to Act 1 of the game. After all of the talk I've done on creepy, cavernous and labyrinth-like levels throughout this video, the spider caves in Precursor Legacy blow them all away with its high contrast, colourful tones of greens and blues, combined with the harsh warm reds and dark pools of eco in abundance on the map. And that music, God, it makes your skin crawl. The vast majority of objectives are seen in the main room here, with millipedes to shoot, spiders hanging from the ceiling, and bouncing around on trampolines of webbing. Off to one side of this gnarled terrain is the Black Void, an empty mine shaft with no light. An excellent gimmick and visual when it suddenly becomes illuminated with the night vision greens as Jak makes his way through for a power cell. To the other side of the cave network, tunnels lead through to Golan Maya's Precursor bot surrounded by scaffolding, as this part of the cave has been mined completely hollow. What lies before your eyes is an amazing platforming challenge, constantly working your way up and up to the top of this giant structure. It's without question one of the greatest set pieces in a level I think I've ever seen. But good luck finding your way back out of here, because one wrong turn will find yourself cornered in a nest of hatching spider eggs. What can I say to cap this off? Brilliant design and gameplay all around this place, making a definitive best cave level in my opinion. Now for number 7, we've got a bit of an anomaly. This one could have easily been grouped in with the main Wasteland map, but given its significance and vastly different theme, I've decided to give it its own spot on the list. Number 7 goes to the terraformer and final boss of Jak 3. After Cyber Errol takes control of the Darkmaker ship, it crash lands in the Wasteland and... my god. Just look at this gargantuan mess of a final boss. Where do you even begin to take a crack at this thing? It dwarfs the entire map, which is just so fascinating to see, and it really is one of the best doomsday creatures I've ever seen. It can be tough taking out its legs, but it's a mission that spans the entirety of the map, challenging your knowledge of the landscape and rewards the player for thinking ahead on their attack. Finally, you've done it, and it collapses to the ground, but it's still not over. So Jak climbs the twisted structure to face Cyber Errol one last time, and this is an excellent boss fight. On its own, it's great, but in combination with that previous act, it really stands out as the most memorable battle in the franchise's history. It really is stunning to me. Most games tend to fall flat on their face in the final moments, but Jak 3 shows everyone how to end an epic adventure. And speaking of the end, number 6 is the end for Jak 2, our distance player for today's episode with the largest level count at 23, and the pumping station closes out this game's amazing run through the ranking. Beyond the palace structure, is there a more iconic location in Haven City than this place? The natural landscape has been grafted into a mechanical abomination, with pipelines, pistons and wind turrets all over the vertical cliffs. The beaches, or what's left of them, have been overrun by metalheads, so much so that we need some help from the Peacemaker to take them all out. One of the strangest details to this map is the hoverboard grind that actually takes you out of the area and onto another location, the landing pad that connects the dig site and crew's weapon lab. But it's still so strange. Why is this here? My only assumption is that maybe this world was intended to be a lot more open than what we got in the end, but it still helps to make a lot of these individual areas feel connected in some shape or form. The pumping station is also where we encounter Ashelin for the first time, a first date that sees us obliterate half of the metalhead race. It's a fucking massacre, Jesus. I would have to say that this was a heavily underutilized location that could have seen a lot more. Its structure of cliff sides and industrial platforms, the breezy soundtrack, all of it made for such a well done location that is sadly the end for Jak 2. We've only got 5 more levels left, and spoiler alert, 4 of them belong to Precursor Legacy, including the Lost Precursor City. Submerged beneath the rock village, this ancient tube network is littered with electrified water that glows a gorgeous green, various forms of puzzles that revolve around timed jumps, and these funny platforms that would go on to be ripped off in Spyro: A Hero's Tale. In fact, the entire underwater Lost City idea was featured in that game, and there is no question why, because Naughty Dog absolutely nailed the theme here. Everyone has so many good things to say about this more linear map on every detail. The atmosphere, the layout and design, the challenge and the variety. More of those fun tubular slides, blue eco switch puzzles, a good old sprint to escape a rising pool of dark eco, and the very interesting variety of new obstacles and enemies that we don't see anywhere else. I love the bigger pods that have a lot going on in each one. They definitely stand out. And riding that chamber back to the surface and grabbing that final power cell is always the end of some of the best content this game has to offer. Ooh, it's getting real tough now, but number 4 goes to Snowy Mountain. One of the few locations you can see from just about any point on the map, it acts as a great contrast to the fiery volcano it sits atop. Like I've said previously, snow locations are incredibly rare in the series, probably because they knocked it out of the park on the first try and knew that there was no need to ever go back there. We've got snowballs, slippery ice, hidden caves obscured by trees, and the Flut makes a return to leap across the great chasms that split the terrain down the middle. When you reach the end, hit the button to lower the gate, and now you've got entry into the fortress. Perfection. It's great to see how many different aspects to the broader snow theme were included here. Everything from the thick coating that you sink into, to the freezing burrows and the stunning vista views of the entire map. There is not much else to be said for this, other than this is how you execute a snow level that excites the player and leaves them wanting more. With only one more Jak 3 level to cover, let's check out number 3, the Stadium and Palace Ruins. It's gonna be difficult to describe the narrative impact this level has on the world of this series. The first time I saw that tower collapse, I never would have expected to see the devastation it left on this city so up close, let alone actually get to play through this for what just so happens to be a very well constructed level. Really, this starts out in the remnants of Maintown, which was our third from the bottom of the list. It creates a familiar landmark and turns it on its head to make it feel fresh, which this part of Haven City really needed after serving little to no purpose previously. Which means that the extinction of life in this part of town almost brought the life out of it. Trudging through the scarred streets, progressing up towards the palace, the attention to detail is amazing to see, with many of the core architecture pieces still standing in a lot of places to remain familiar. There are a lot of enemies crawling around here, and much of the platforming leaves you very uneasy until Deimos crashes in to rescue the duo. Even though the game considers these separate levels or missions, I'm grouping them together because combined, they make up one of the best moments, ramming your way through the larger ruins and taking out the biggest creatures yet. It's an excellent closing moment for both Jak 3's narrative and for Jak 3's run on this list, ending with a major breakthrough in the story that ties everything together. It is actually superb, and it blows my mind to think that there are still 2 more levels that can top it, both from our sole survivor from today's video, Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. Have you been keeping track? Do you know what's left? Because these levels are both so good and so intertwined with each other, they are both getting the big speech treatment for the grand finale. Level number 2 is the amazing Sentinel Beach. While we take our first steps on Geyser Rock, these are our first steps into this stunning universe we've been celebrating today, as the game naturally leads you from Sandover and around into this cove. White sands, cliff pathways to explore, caves and waterfalls, even coastal ruins. I don't think I've ever seen a first level do such a good job at introducing you to the mechanics and structure of a game's objectives quite like this. Everywhere you look, your eyes catch a new point of interest that, when you reach it, triggers a chain of events that leads flawlessly into the next objective. And the music is sensational. Just give it a listen. Just from watching that has had more effect than any of my words could in describing why this level deserves its spot so high on this list. Such serenity, creating a safe space to get comfortable in before the grand adventure ahead. It was almost impossible to pick between these two for that top spot, but the number 1 best level in Jak and Daxter has to go to the Forbidden Jungle. Yes, that's right, another level featured early on into the game. After seeing all the sights on Sentinel Beach and wandering back around to the other side of the village, you can follow the shore again and climb up to find a breathtaking jungle filled with all sorts of critters, snakes hanging down from trees, janky rope bridges, and many secrets. The music and overall presentation again is just impossible to fault. But now we're actually starting to get into the game. It's our first taste of danger on this journey that gives the entire location a kick of fear. Localized around these central precursor pillars, which, as we've seen today, became an often recycled feature to many levels that would follow, never would you expect the opportunity to actually climb this thing and explore its catacombs below. This is where we fight a giant plant, which may be the weakest boss fight in the series, but it's what follows that makes this truly special. While down below, we activate the blue eco vents to open up all over the map, and now what Forbidden Jungle does is serve as the most crucial location on this journey by showcasing how powerful the relationship between the various levels is to the structure of the game. Now, going back to Sentinel Beach, finally we can use the blue eco to launch across the rocky platforms and reach the top of this tower. That's what I was talking about! These levels go hand in hand in teaching the player that this is a real world. Every action has a reaction somewhere else. In the jungle, we also have to find and direct these light towers that lead us on a path beyond the confines of Forbidden Jungle to solve a problem elsewhere. And down below the cliffs by the riverbed is where we meet the fisherman, who, after helping to land a good catch, allows you to borrow his boat to travel to Misty Island. Yet another link between two seemingly individual, unique locations as a tool for crafting one realistic and naturally flowing game world. It's fucking exceptional game design, and Naughty Dog at its finest if you ask me. That was one of my key criteria in the beginning of this ranking, to look at how these levels serve and fit into the grander scheme of these games from both a gameplay and narrative point of view. And after everything we've discussed today, I feel that Forbidden Jungle is the prime definition of that core feature, which was the foundation the Jak and Daxter series was built upon. And after all of that, I can only hope that we haven't seen the last of this franchise, because there is still so much more to uncover with this narrative, so many more amazing locations that we're yet to see, and if there is any old franchise that could still survive in a modern market, this would definitely be it. Oh, holy shit, that was so much fun to do. Both the every level ranked and my recent re-review of the Jak and Daxter trilogy. I've spent 5 years wanting to come back and do something more with what is without question one of my all-time favourites, so I'm glad that I finally had the chance to do that here, and I hope you've all enjoyed watching. I would like to give a special thanks to the amazing people you see here for helping me out with this project, as well as to everyone who is pledged over on Patreon for allowing me the freedom to create and do what I love to do. If you think that I've earned it today, then Patreon is an amazing way to support the channel, but it would also mean so much to me if everyone could drop a like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and on social media if you'd like to see more from this channel in the future. I also cannot wait to read the comments on this video, so please let me know your favourite and least favourite levels from the franchise down below. And until next time, I'm Square-Eyed Jak, and I hope you have a great fucking day. Thanks for watching.